My advice to you is to carve your own lane. Now, I want you to write that down and make that your mantra, maybe for the next at least 7 days. Maybe let's even do it deeper, right? Or deeply. Make that your mantra for the next 14 days. And I'm speaking to you if you are a content creator. Let's use these terms. If you're an influencer, if you're an educator, if you are an investor, if you're an entrepreneur, I'm going to encourage you. Here's your permission slip. All right. Let's use this. Here's your permission slip to carve your own lane. There are so many things and so many threads I can use to get us to jump off on this one. But the reality is I just wanted to be raw and real because that's what you guys asked for. And just tell you the truth, like carve your own lane. The challenge we have in society is too many people are lacking variety. Too many people are trying to be someone else. They're trying to act like someone else. They're not trying to be themselves. And I get it, all right? I get it because most of us go through some form of formal schooling, okay? And often you will find that the people who aren't attempting to be other people are people who got kicked out of school or people who, quote unquote, didn't do well in school or people who were always not the norm in school, okay? And you find that when you search back, dig deep into a lot of people's history, you find that they were the black sheep, as they say, right? Which is a really weird term. I don't know where that term comes from, but if anyone knows, let me know in the comments. So oftentimes you'll find a trend and a pattern in those people who are ADHD, those people who are dyslexic, those people who you know fit those narratives of not fitting the narrative of the mainstream. And it's interesting because the mainstream causes many people, if not all people, to basically, quote unquote, be the same. And again, in one of my previous videos, I spoke about lemmings, but that's what that is, right? It's the game to make everyone the same. So my admonition to you, my permission slip to you, my support mechanism and verbiage to you today is carve your own lane. Don't be afraid to carve your own lane. And I'm going to share a few things in this video that's going to assist you. But the first thing I want to say is the reason it can be challenging to carve your own lane is because many people, when you start carving out your own lane, are still going to think that you are the same. Okay. And you might be thinking, Samuel, what does that mean? Okay. And I'm so glad you asked. Okay. So here's how that goes. When you start carving out your own lane, because you're the first person to pioneer in such a way, other people will not have a vocabulary and side by side with that a dictionary to define what you're doing. People won't have the language to say, oh, he's doing this or she's doing this. So what they will do very often is they will liken you to something that they think is like you. They will liken you often to something that they understand, comprehend, and perceive to be the closest thing to what is the thing they're seeing you do. But here's the thing. If you are an influencer, if you are an investor, if you are an educator, if you are a true and genuine entrepreneur, someone who goes out there to solve other people's problems, then what you are doing is 99% of the time impossible to be what someone else is doing, because you have to show up as your unique self to be of high value in the marketplace as an influencer. To influence other people, your influence is automatically diluted if you show up as somebody else. Your entrepreneurial ability to solve people's problems is automatically diluted if you show up as someone else. Your ability to invest in the things that you have from a value perspective, from a mindset perspective, close to your heart, becomes diluted. Now, I get it. If you're like in the world of trading, and investing, okay, there's generally two different ways they say people trade, okay? There's fundamentals, people that trade based on underlying factors, the fundamentals, and then there's the analytical, okay? I think there might be a different name for it, but analytical, the people that are using charts, using specific principles, using specific mathematical equations and formulas to trade. So they're the two different types of traders they often talk about in the trading world. The point I'm making is whether you are a fundamental trader or whether you are an analytical trader, trading through means of algorithms, etc., you have to be yourself, because if you aren't yourself, it's only a matter of time. And that should be the second line. Besides carve your own lane, the second line should be, because if I don't, it's only a matter of time. Only a matter of time till what happens, Samuel? Until people find you out. Because if you're an investor, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're an educator, if you are someone who is creating a form or a level of influence for other people in the world, you will find very quickly that people will find you out. People will find out who you really are. Because firstly, birds of a feather, they say, flock together. That's one reason why. You will generally gravitate towards, especially as you become more acknowledged, especially as you become more self-aware, you will tend to gravitate towards people who are exactly like who you really are. And if who you really are isn't who you've been saying you are, then you're going to be gravitating towards people who people are going to think is incongruent with who you said you are. And that's obvious what's really happening. What's really happening is either you might be clout chasing, which happens a lot. And clout chasing, for those of you who don't know, for those of you who are my generation, clout chasing is when you are going after people because of what they have instead of because of who they are. And more importantly, definitely instead of because of what you have to offer to them. Okay. So that becomes a big kind of thing. Like sometimes people are clout chasing. So, okay, they're going around people who they desire to be around. And that's, again, birds of a feather flock together. And the other instance a lot of the time is people are just naturally drawn to people who are like them. Okay, it's the law of magnetism, which we won't go into in too depth in this video. But this is what I really wanted to express to you today. Like, don't be someone who's waiting on being able to reveal who you are, but instead from day one, carve your own lane. Carve your own lane. Be the pioneer. Like, be bold enough, be brave enough, be bodacious enough to say, I'm carving my own lane. Now, again, like I said, in the start of carving your own lane, it's not going to feel like you are carving your own lane, even though you know you're carving your own lane when you're genuinely doing it, because other people are going to liken you to other people. As I share this, there's two things that are coming to mind. I'll share both of them with you. The first one is a biblical story of Jesus, the Messiah, the Savior, the one who's come to change the whole world, right? He shows up and he says to his disciples, he doesn't say this to strangers, he says to his own disciples, people that had been following him, right? At this time for about 2.5 years, he says to them, who do men say that I am? Who are people telling people that I am? And they start reeling off these names, okay? Some say you're this person. Some say you're that person. Some say you're that person, okay? And then he says to them, well, who do you say that I am? Okay, now the reason this is powerful is because what it reveals to us is that proximity produces and provides perception. Okay, I'm going to say that again in case you need to pick up your pen. What that shares with us, what that reveals to us is that proximity often provides and positions our perception. So the closer you are to a pioneer, the more you can see of who they really are. The closer you are to a pioneer, the more you can see who they really are. And this is why there are times where some people get close to other people and then realize, oh, I don't want to be close to them anymore, okay? Because they recognize, oh, you're not who I thought you were from the outside, for example, okay? So the point I'm making in this is be bold enough to be yourself. Be bold enough to pioneer. Be bold enough to go out there and share who you are in the way you are supposed to, in your investment endeavors, in your entrepreneurial endeavors, in your educational endeavors. I remember when I first started coaching people and actually sharing the biblical foundation of where I got the concepts I was sharing. I remember how awkward that felt, but I also remember how liberating it felt. It felt awkward because at the time I hadn't seen anyone else do that the same way, but it felt liberating because at the time I knew I was for the first time really being myself. And you know, some people liked it. In the UK, we might use this term. Some people lumped it, but that didn't make a difference to me. What made the difference to me is I could be free. I could share, just like I just did here. Like I can share, like there was a biblical story. Like I often say this when I'm talking to people. I often say the best way for me to describe what I'm talking about in this instance is to share a Bible story, because the Bible has such a succinct way of synthesizing ideas. It has such a succinct way of capturing principles, precepts, and patterns in a very simple fashion. And I'd be fooling myself if I was going to spend 20 minutes trying to articulate and trying to share an idea with you when I could actually just share a 3-verse story or a 2-verse parable from the Bible, and boom, like, oh, it hits. And it's like, oh, I get that. And what I realized is the liberation that I found from sharing the way I felt more natural to share actually produced more liberation in other people, because people could now hear what I was attempting to truly share. Not because I became a better communicator overnight, no, but because I was communicating something better overnight. So carve your own lane. Carve your own lane. Carve your own lane. Here is your permission slip today. Carve your own lane. Now, like I said, the first thing that's going to happen when you start carving your own lane is people are still going to attempt to associate you with other people. People are still going to point at you and say, oh, you're like the British version of this person, or you're like that person, etc. You're like the male version of that person, and so forth and so forth. And I guess I'll say this as kind of like my heartfelt PS letter to you. Don't take offense at that. Okay, and I'm not saying don't take offense at that because the people they're comparing you to are brilliant people. That's not the case. I'm saying don't take offense at that because first and foremost, a sign of maturity is to not necessarily just have to take offense. That's the first thing, okay? And it takes a lot of emotional maturity. It takes a lot of emotional intelligence for us to be able to do that. But that's not the reason why I'm saying that. The reason I'm saying don't take offense at that is because in many of these people's cases, where they're not being a quote unquote troll, or they're not attempting to insult you directly, in many of these cases the reason people do that is because they don't have the expansive vocabulary, they don't have an extensive dictionary, and that's the reason why they're doing it. They're doing it because they're attempting to recognize you from a place of limitation. They're attempting to categorize you from a place of limitation, and the reality is you cannot categorize something you've not experienced from a limited place. It just doesn't make sense. You need to expand yourself in order to express yourself when talking about something that is beyond yourself. And this is what happens for many people in many dimensions. This is why we have the I know culture, where people are exposed to things that are brand new, but yet their summary of it, their term on it, the way they will summarize it is, oh, I knew that already, or I know that, okay? And, I love the line, if you knew better, you would do better. And the reality is, in most people's cases, they don't know better. That's why they don't do better. Most people don't know already. They just say, I know already, because that's what we're taught to do through formal schooling. And this is why I'm really not on the formal schooling thing, okay? Because a lot of the time, we hide behind our fake slogans. We hide behind our I knows. When the reality is you don't know, because if you did know, you wouldn't be in the situation you're in right now. You wouldn't be in the predicament you're in right now. Your situation would be brighter. It would be better. Okay, it would be more buoyant. So this is the first factor as you carve your own lane that I want to share with you, and I want you to be prepared for. I want you to be aware of. It's okay if people attempt to associate you with things that you necessarily don't associate yourself with. It's okay if people attempt to measure you by yardsticks that you don't necessarily measure yourself by. In often cases, that's just them from a place of limitation attempting to recognize you. That's just them from a place of limitation attempting to categorize you. That's just them from a place of limitation attempting to define you and describe you. And I get it. Like, I hear in my heart, like, the question, oh, but Samuel, why did they have to do that? Why did they have to put me in a box? I'm going to tell you something, because everybody attempts to put everything in a box. It's the way the rational side of our brain thinks, okay? The rational side of our brain is always trying to compartmentalize stuff in order for us to say we understand stuff, or we know stuff, or we have a grasp of stuff, okay? So again, don't take it as an insult, don't be offended. Second thing that often happens when you start carving your own lane is you start seeing things you were not seeing prior to your I'll use this term, your breakout, okay? What does that mean? Well, if you're someone who's in the world of investing, okay, I'll speak about this from a property perspective. If you're someone who's in the world of investing and you've always wanted to do something, so I'll give you an example. I'll tell you my quick story. So I worked as an estate agent, my first full-time job at the age of 19. And it was that experience beyond, aside, with some other things that came prior, but that experience was one of the strong experiences in my formative years, if you can call 19 that, where I was exposed to property investment and I was exposed to the opportunities and possibilities of that. One of the things I recognized when I was working as an estate agent is the large majority of landlords or people that would come into the estate agency who own property were not generating any real income, but there were one or two landlords that were generating some significant income. And that kind of woke me up to the whole principle the Bible talks about, where it says, wide is the path that leads to destruction and many there be upon that path, but narrow is the road that leads to godliness and life, and few there be upon that path. Now, this is not a biblical interpretation of that verse, but this is definitely a business application of that verse. In that verse, what we're seeing is that the wide road is what most people are on, and it's the road that produces the results most people have. And we all know statistically and mathematically that most people don't have what they desire to have. So what does that tell us? It tells us that the narrow road in business, the narrow road in investing, the narrow road in influence, the narrow road in education, the narrow road in all paths like entrepreneurship is actually the path that's going to lead to the real results. So I kind of discovered that at the age of 19, I went on to go to university. I got a part-time job in the Carve warehouse in sales, and I got that part-time job so I could work whilst I was going to university. I went off to university to start studying my undergraduate degree. Now, when I left the estate agency quote-unquote job, because I had been activated in my mindset around property investment and the potential and what it could do for me, what I started to do is I started to study what I now call creative property investing, okay? So I define creative property investing as three basic things. The first one is how you use other people's money in order to generate income from property. The second one is how you find what I call off-market property opportunities. That is also, in my definition, creative property investing. And how you use property in order to help other people generate revenue, okay? And obviously you may be one of those other people, but how you use property investment or property assets in order to help you generate income. So I define those three core things as the essence, the heartbeat of creative property investing. So I got to this place where I'm going to university full-time student classification. I'm working part-time, and in my spare time, I'm jumping on webinars, okay? And they were called conference calls those days. They weren't even called webinars. And for those of you who know, you know. So I was jumping on conference calls and I was reading what we used to call e-manuals. Now today people have e-books, right? E-books are typically like 20 pages, 30 pages, 50 pages, okay? So the sourcing blueprint ebook that I have is a 20-page ebook, okay? That ebooks are typically very few pages. E-manuals, which is what we used to get when the internet first came out, the 2004, 2005 world, they were 300 pages, 400 pages, 500 pages sometimes, right? So they were effectively a book, sometimes even more extensive than the actual book, but you'd get it online. You get it as a PDF or as a book online. So I would get these e-manuals online, me and my brother, and we'd read through these e-manuals talking about property, talking about how to invest, talking about the creative ways to invest. And at that time, I don't know of any hardcore UK property coaches that were out there at that time. I don't know of any at that time. Maybe besides one. Maybe Mike Frisbee was a name that I remember from that time. And I now have met Mike personally. Me and Mike have worked together personally, etc. So I know Mike now, but I think back in the day, I think Mike Frisbee was probably one of the only people who were in the UK that I maybe heard of some of his content or literature at this time, right? 2004, 2005. And Mike, if you're watching this, you can correct me and let me know if you were out there at that time. But at the time, the majority of coaches or people writing these e-manuals were people from the USA or people from Australasia, okay? So I remember reading these e-manuals 2004, 2005 and asking myself, okay, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? So the first part I shared, when you start crafting your own lane, when you start creating your own lane, when you start creating your own path and carving your own path, is people are going to attempt to define you by assimilating you and associating you with other people. And the second part I shared is that you are going to start to see things you weren't seeing before. So as an estate agent, I saw things. Why? Because I took the leap to be an estate agent. When I stopped being an estate agent and I started getting into e-manuals and ebooks, guess what? Because I've taken the leap to go on this educational journey, I started seeing things I hadn't seen before. I never knew when I worked as an estate agent about lease options. I'd never had no real, true, earthly idea in 2004, 2004, 2003, what a lease option was. But in 2005, when I was studying this stuff through e-manuals, I knew exactly what a lease option was. I knew exactly what seller financing was. I knew exactly what all of these other more exotic, if you want to use that word, strategies became alive to me. Why? Because I stepped out of the box. I started to carve my own lane. I started to go on a journey of saying, you know what, I'm stepping out of the boat. I'm walking in faith. I'm gonna do something. I'm not just gonna complain about the things I see as a pain. I'm not just going to talk about the fact that, oh, I didn't have enough money to invest. So as a result, I can't do this. No, that wasn't my mindset. My mindset was, how can I do this? My mindset was, who can help me to do this? And because those things were my mindsets and those things were my mantras, it caused me to step out. And when I started to step out, #carve my own lane, I started to see things I couldn't see before. Now, one of the greatest things I saw, which is going to help us get into the third aspect of what happens. One of the greatest things I saw when I started taking these steps, when I started to learn more, when I started to expose myself to these strategies, when I started to network more, when I started to start doing certain deals, etc. One of the greatest things I saw is that at the heart of every strategy, okay, at the heart of every strategy, most people in the UK are doing the buy-to-let strategy. There's a whole secondary group of people who are doing the flip strategy, okay? Buy to let, you buy one house, you rent it to one family. Flip, you buy a house, maybe making some changes, and then you sell the house off, okay? Now what's become very popular in the last 4 or 5 years is the buy, refurbish, refinance strategy, which has been going on again for decades, maybe even for centuries. But the buy, refurbish, refinance, another one that's got more popular. People are advertising more about that these days, okay? Over the last 7-8 years, the service accommodation has become more popular, okay? For those of you who call it Airbnb, etc., right? Service accommodation, renting or buying a house and then renting it out on a nightly basis, okay? HMOs over the last 10 to 12 years, very popular, okay? So these are just like 5 strategies I'm just sharing off the cuff, right? Another very popular strategy, which most people don't do, is development, okay? So, buy a piece of land, build a house, or buy a house, convert the house into a block of flats, okay? So development, forms of development. Now, that's 6 strategies I've just shared with you very quickly, right? Now, I'm not sharing these strategies for you to go and do these strategies. I'm sharing these strategies to share with you what I discovered when I started carving my own lane, when I started learning, when I started realizing someone can help me. How can I get help? How can I do this, right? The first thing that really stood out to me, because I believe I'm a person who thinks in first principles. I look at problems and I'm like, well, where's the genesis of this problem? How do we solve this problem from its root so we can start producing some fruit? And one of the things I discovered is no matter what strategy you're going to do, including all of the 6 I just mentioned to you, there is something that has to happen before you can do any of those strategies. And what I realized is the thing that needs to take place before any of those strategies can even be selected is a property has to be sourced. The land has to be sourced. A property has to be found. The skill or the art and the science of finding great deals is at the heart, is at the epicenter, is at the beginning of any deal. It does not matter if you're doing buy to let. It does not matter if you're doing flips. It does not matter if you're doing buy, refurbish, refinance. It does not matter what strategy you are doing. It starts with sourcing the great deal. And this is part of the reason why I personally believe that most people who are active in property across the whole globe are suboptimal in their cash flow creation because they have not realized one simple discovery, which is probably the first principle I ever heard about property, but that is you make your money when you buy. And if it is true that you make your money when you buy, then the ability to source great properties, the ability to find great property deals is most likely the most valuable skill set that anyone can have in the landscape of property investment, real estate, etc. Now, what I want us to do is I want to take this idea outside of property, okay? I want to take this idea into the world of investing, okay? Because what happens when you invest, you are putting your money in with the intention and hope to generate more money out. So what's the probably the most valuable skill set in investing? It's being able to find a great deal. Okay, let's put this into the context of entrepreneurship. Okay, what are we doing in entrepreneurship? We are solving people's problems with the goal to generate a return. So let's break it down and boil it down. So what would be probably one of the most valuable skills? It will be the ability to identify and find great problems that we know we can solve. Find a great deal. Okay, let's talk about being a person of influence. If you're a person of influence, if you're out there with 100,000 subscribers, you're out there with 100,000 followers, right? Your ability to find a great deal, okay, whether it be content that you're speaking about, whether it be content that you're entertaining people with, whether it be a context that you entertain people around, your ability to find a great deal again becomes one of the most foundational and valuable skills. So when I discovered this in around 2005, 2006, it changed everything for me. Why? Because when you carve your own lane, things that were invisible to you before start to become plain. You start to see things you couldn't see before. And what I saw was that the genesis of every strategy was another strategy, which was the ability to find great deals. And that's all I focused on. I literally focused on that for over 10 years, like in a high level. I literally just said to myself, okay, from now on, all of the training, all of the development I'm going to do is going to have something to do with finding great deals. I'm going to sharpen my skills. The Bible says iron sharpeneth iron. I'm going to get super laser focused on being able to find great deals. So much so that although I started my property journey not having any money, I started by saying to myself, I can start generating money by finding great deals for other people, selling those deals to other people, and they would pay me a fee for me to find that deal for them because I had found that deal for them. And what I realized is if I get really good at this, the majority of people who are buying these deals are people who are in the medical profession, in the IT. I think IT was a big profession for us, but in the IT profession, you know, there's some care home owners, but these are people that are super busy in their own industry. They don't even have the time to learn the art, the skill, or the science of finding great deals. And they definitely don't have the time not only to learn it, but then to go and execute the activities that's necessary. And for those of you who are thinking, Samuel, what necessary activities are there? Well, this is stuff I shared on one of my previous videos. It's the sourcing blueprint. It's being able to market. It's being able to manage. It's being able to measure. And it's being able to mature these great deals. So the second thing, for the sake of time, the second thing that is going to be paramount for you to understand as you take your permission slip today and carve your own way is that you're going to start seeing things you weren't seeing before. And what's interesting about this is the reason why so many people are not going to be able to define you appropriately at the start. Because when you start doing what you're supposed to be doing, when you start carving your lane the way you're supposed to be carving your lane, and you start seeing things that are now becoming plain, you are going to start moving in a different way because you see things different to everyone else. You see things different to the quote unquote the masses, if we use that language. So because you see things different, you're going to operate different. And this is again going to go back to the first thing that people are going to potentially do. It's going to make it harder for those people to categorize you. And this is where that journey of them attempting to put you in someone else's box or them attempting to say you are just like this starts becoming harder for them. And this is why it's so important that you don't give up carving your own lane when people start attempting to associate your name with someone else's name. Keep going, keep pushing, keep making it happen. Third thing. So the first thing that's going to happen when you start carving your own name, when you take the permission slip and say, I'm using that, and you start carving your own name, is people are not going to be able to define you, okay? So because they can't define you, they may associate you or define you based on other things and other people. Second thing that's going to happen is you're going to start seeing things you weren't seeing before, okay? Third thing that's going to happen is the network effect. People are going to start attempting to connect with you who were not interested in connecting with you before, okay? People are going to attempt to connect with you who were not interested in connecting with you before. Now, what's interesting about this is I just looked a moment ago at my phone because someone reached out to me recently and basically said to me, hey, you know, I'd love to have a chat with you, etc. And this person didn't want to reach out to me before, okay? So in my head, I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And this is where emotional intelligence gets tested at the highest level, okay? And you may know exactly what I'm talking about already. You may have already been in this predicament before, okay? Because a lot of the time, our immature mind is saying, oh, you didn't want to connect with me before, so I'm not going to connect with you, okay? Another part of our mind, maybe our more rational mind, is saying, well, if I start connecting with you now, I'm taking time away from digging deeper into the lane that I'm carving, okay? And then there's the sympathetic part of our mind, which is like, no, I'll give you a chance. I'll give you a shot. I'll give you the opportunity, okay? Now, I'm not saying which of those is right, okay? Because we're all different. Like, we all have different ideas about life. We all have different ideas about what we want to do next. What I will say to you is, if you are a praying person, if you are a believing individual, then as the Bible says, like, those who are led by the Spirit of God are the sons of God. Be led by the Spirit of God. Put this in prayer and allow God to direct your path. That's what I would say to you, okay? Because that's what I would do. However, the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is one of the biggest stumbling blocks that occurs for people. People start carving their own lane, carving their own lane, carving their own lane. Yes, people start associating them with this person and this thing and that thing. And they keep carving their own lane, carving their own lane. And then things that were invisible start to become plain. And they start seeing these things become plain, and they keep carving their own lane, carving their own lane. And then people who didn't necessarily want to connect with them before now want to connect with them more. And the reason I'm saying this is because this third layer is a layer a lot of the time which causes the carving of the own lane to get derailed. Because like I said earlier on, if you're someone who's genuinely in your heart of hearts just out here to get accolades, and you're not out here to create impact, what will happen is when people are attempting to get in touch with you, that's when you will drop the ball on the lane that you've been carving. That's when you will say to yourself, okay, cool, I'm now going to run at this person's beck and call and that person's beck and call, rather than recognizing it's the lane carving activity that's causing people to have an interest in you. You see, most of us don't realize that we in and of ourselves are not the value. Okay, I'm going to say it again. Most of us don't realize that we in and of ourselves are not the value. The value is what we are able to provide and bring to the marketplace. And if we stop working on what we're able to provide and bring to the marketplace because a few people now want to see our face, what we're going to do is unfortunately fall from grace. And I don't want that to be your story. I definitely don't want that to be my story. And this is part of the reason I'm putting this out here, because I want you to know that beyond that third step, beyond that I'm doing this for people step, is I'm doing this for a purpose step. And when you break into I'm doing this for a purpose more than I'm doing this for people, that's when you start allowing the lane you're carving to have generational impact. Because it's not being done because of someone. It's being done because there's purpose behind this. It's being done because there's more to this than just me. There's more to this than what you see. There's more to this than the thing that caused you to reach out to me and say, hey, let's have a chat. Hey, I'm interested in connecting with you. Hey, I think there's something we could do together. Most people don't realize that those 3 tiers that I've just shared with you are 3 of the biggest times, 3 of the biggest steps, 3 of the biggest hurdles where people decide, no, I'm done. I'm not carving my own lane anymore. First and foremost, when people misappropriate who you are with something else. Secondarily, where you are on a journey and you're seeing things different to other people, and maybe you're challenged at that stage too, or battled at that stage, or feel battled at that stage too, to actually articulate the things you're actually seeing because no one else is talking about them in the way you're talking about them. And then the third and foremost is when people want to reach out and want to now rub shoulders with you. And you're thinking to yourself, well, why didn't you want to rub shoulders with me before? Why weren't you reaching out before? And look, let's just keep it real. Sometimes people are busy. Sometimes people are too busy to want to be in your DMs until you're doing stuff that's really speaking to them. Maybe it's just that. Maybe sometimes people are too busy, okay? But like I said, the whole process of this takes emotional intelligence. And unfortunately, for some people, the whole process of this breaks emotional intelligence. And the reason I wanted to share this with you is, first and foremost, I wanted to give you the permission slip. I wanted to give you your permission slip, your personal private permission slip to go carve your own lane. But I also wanted to share with you what can attempt to stand in the way. So you can be prepared as you get to each of those hurdles to know how to jump them, to know how to maneuver them, and know how to move further, faster. Now, I've been doing these videos for around 2 weeks now, straight, daily. And I didn't say this in the previous videos because I didn't want to let myself down, and I definitely didn't want to let you down. But my goal is to do at least 30 of these videos every single day and to continue to be consistent. Now, I slightly feel like I'm getting the hang of this, showing up daily. And at the same time, we've got our cash flow creation week literally taking place around now as well. So I know that with that heightened responsibility of work that I'm going to be doing, as well as the commitment to show up for you each day, things may get challenging. But I'm believing that I can do this. So this is the first time, even though it's been around 2 weeks, that I thought I'd put it out there, that my goal is to continue doing this, continue adding value, continue opening up the pages of my literal heart journal, and sharing value with you to help you move further, faster. So as I said at the start of this, if you are an influencer, if you are an investor, if you are an educator, if you are an entrepreneur, and you're looking at more explosive and expansive ways to actually get paid, to create cash flow so the rest of your life can be the best of your life, I want to encourage you to hit subscribe. I want to encourage you to hit the like. I want to encourage you to leave a comment below and let me know. Let me know what you do. Let me know why you do it. Let me know that purpose, that burning zeal behind it. Let me know why you want to get that growth and produce the impact that you believe God has called you to produce. Because I want to be here to support you. I want to be here to help you, not just through these daily videos, but through the insights, through the value that I've put together to provide to you, that, thanks be to God, I've been able to discover from the coaches I've had, from the leaders I've been around, from the pages of the scriptures that I've been able to embrace. And hopefully, by the grace of God, all of this will become a cementing, fortified level of value that you can use to move further, faster in your future. So if that being said, Samuel, I can win. I'm signing out. I often say this. I'll say it again in case you need to pick up your pen. Remember that small keys open up big doors. And if you got value from this, be sure to go watch one of these other daily videos, because I know they're always also going to be of value to you too. Let's go.